The cash felt obscene in her hands. 5 $10 bills, crisp and new, like Leon had stopped at an ATM specifically for this moment. Tessa Faulkner sat on the edge of their king-size bed, the silk duvet cold beneath her thighs, and counted them again. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. The numbers didn't change. $50. Her husband moved $8 million through shell corporations every week, and he'd left her with $50. Before we go deeper into the story, you are welcome to Empire Stories. We're building a community that refuses to accept neglect and betrayal as normal. If you believe women deserve respect, loyalty, and real love, not control disguised as protection, subscribe and help us get to 10,000 subscribers. Your support helps us spread these stories to people who need to know. They deserve better, and it's okay to walk away. That should handle things while I'm gone. Leon's voice came from the walk-in closet, casual, like he was discussing the weather. Not like he was abandoning his 9 months pregnant wife for a month in Italy with another woman. Tessa's hand moved to her swollen belly, feeling the baby press against her ribs. The kicks had changed in the last few days. Lower now, more insistent. Her doctor, the private one Leon paid cash for, so there'd be no insurance trail, had said the baby had dropped. Any day now, maybe even any hour. Leon. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Dr. Brennan said I'm already 2 centimeters dilated. She said not to be alone. You won't be alone. Leon emerged from the closet, sliding a Rolex onto his wrist with the practiced motion of a man who wore power like cologne. The building has security. There's food in the kitchen. You're not some helpless child, Tessa. But his eyes weren't on her. They were on his phone, where a message preview had just lit up the screen. Milan will be perfect. I've never been to Europe. Can't wait, baby. The sender's name flashed for just a moment before the screen went dark. Jolene. Tessa had seen Jolene Marks exactly once, at a charity gala 3 months ago. She'd worn a black dress that looked like liquid night, and when she'd looked at Leon across the ballroom, her smile had been sharp enough to cut glass. Leon had introduced her as a business associate, but business associates didn't rest their hands on married men's forearms quite that long, didn't lean in quite that close when they laughed. Jolene's going with you. Not a question. Tessa already knew. Leon's jaw tightened, the muscle near his temple jumping. It was the same tell he had when the feds questioned him about the waterfront properties, when he'd stood in front of federal prosecutors and lied with perfect calm. This is a legitimate business trip. The Calabrian families need an intermediary for the shipping contracts. Jolene speaks fluent Italian. She's useful. I speak Italian. Tessa had grown up in Brooklyn, learned from her grandmother who'd come through Ellis Island with nothing but a stolen rosary and a talent for keeping secrets. You speak kitchen Italian. Leon picked up his leather duffel, the Ferragamo bag that cost more than some people's cars. This requires someone who understands legal terminology, someone who can negotiate contracts, someone professional, someone who isn't 8 months pregnant and swollen and inconvenient, Tessa translated silently, someone who still turns heads when she walks into a room. Leon's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and something softened in his face, something Tessa hadn't seen directed at her in months, maybe years. He typed a quick response, his thumb moving across the screen with the kind of attention he used to give her back when they were 22, and she'd thought marrying into the Faulkner family meant protection instead of possession. I'll be back before the baby comes. Leon crossed to the door, not to her. He didn't kiss her goodbye, didn't touch her belly, didn't acknowledge the child who would carry his name and inherit his empire. The cash should cover what you need. There's rice in the pantry, pasta, canned goods. You don't need to go crazy with spending. $50. In a penthouse worth $12 million. In a building where the monthly maintenance alone cost more than Tessa's childhood home. What if something happens? The question escaped before she could stop it, small and frightened, everything Leon had trained her not to be. What if the baby comes early? What if there are complications? Leon stopped at the door, his hand on the brushed nickel handle. For a moment, Tessa thought he might turn around, might see her, might remember that she was human and scared and carrying his child. But when he spoke, his voice was flat, already distant. Women have babies every day, Tessa. Your mother had 4 kids without falling apart. You'll manage one. The door clicked shut behind him. Not slammed. That would have shown emotion. Just clicked, final and cold, like the lock on a safe. Tessa heard voices in the hallway. Leon's low rumble, and then Jolene's laugh, bright and sharp as broken glass. Finally, Jolene said, loud enough to carry through the door, I thought she'd never let you leave. Does she always cling like that? She'll learn. Leon's voice was already fading toward the elevator. Some women need to understand their place. The elevator dinged. The voices disappeared, and Tessa sat on the edge of the bed in the gray-walled master bedroom that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a cell. Counting $50 in tens while her baby kicked against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the baby roll beneath her palm. It's okay, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the baby or herself. We're going to be okay. But when the first real contraction hit 10 minutes later, sharp and breathtaking, and nothing like the practice contractions Dr. Brennan had described, Tessa reached for her phone and found the screen dead. No service. She tried to power it on, but instead of the Apple logo, she got a message. Account suspended due to non-payment. Leon had cut off her phone. The second contraction came harder, faster than the first. Tessa stumbled to the landline on the nightstand, but when she picked up the receiver, there was no dial tone. Just silence, vast and terrible. She tried the door, locked. The electronic security system, the one Leon controlled from his phone, had sealed her in. The third contraction doubled her over, and Tessa Faulkner, wife of the most dangerous man in New York, realized with sudden crystalline clarity that she hadn't just been abandoned, she'd been left to die. The contractions were coming every 7 minutes now, each one a vice grip that squeezed the air from Tessa's lungs and left her gasping against the gray silk duvet. She'd read the pregnancy books Leon had bought her, the expensive ones with embossed covers that he'd never opened himself. 7 minutes apart meant early labor. It meant she had time. It meant she needed to get to a hospital. Except the door was locked. Her phone was dead, and the landline had no dial tone. Tessa stumbled to the bedroom window, her hands pressed against her lower back where the pain radiated like fire. Outside, New York stretched beneath her in a glittering grid of lights and movement. 15 floors below, people walked dogs, hailed taxis, lived normal lives where their husbands didn't lock them in towers like modern-day Rapunzels. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching a pregnant woman in a green coat cross the street below, her partner's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. The window didn't open. Leon had them sealed shut 3 years ago after a bird flew into the glass. Security measure, he'd said. Everything was a security measure. The cameras in the hallways, the electronic locks on every door, the panic room in the basement that only Leon's fingerprint could open. She'd thought it was because he was protecting her, protecting their future family from his enemies. Now she understood. The cage wasn't to keep danger out, it was to keep her in. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and Tessa doubled over against the window seat. 6 minutes. They were speeding up. She tried to breathe through it like the book said, counting slowly, but panic was a living thing crawling up her throat. She was alone. Completely, terrifyingly alone, in a $12 million prison. When the contraction passed, she lurched toward the master bathroom. Her makeup bag sat on the marble counter, next to Leon's cologne and his gold cufflinks arranged in perfect rows. Tessa dumped the bag out, scattering lipsticks and mascara across the floor, and found what she was looking for. The tiny manicure scissors she used for her cuticles. The bedroom door's electronic keypad mocked her with its red locked light. Tessa jabbed the scissors into the seam where the panel met the wall, trying to pry it open, trying to access the wiring like she'd seen in movies. The scissors bent. The panel didn't budge. She threw the scissors across the room, and they clattered against the radiator with a pathetic metallic sound. 5 minutes between contractions now. Tessa's gaze swept the bedroom, looking for anything, any way out. The walk-in closet where Leon's suits hung in pristine rows. The ensuite bathroom with its soaking tub and heated floors. The decorative vases on the mantel above the ornamental fireplace. The crystal ones Leon's mother had given them as a wedding gift. Venetian glass. Priceless. Untouchable. The window didn't open. But glass could break. Tessa grabbed the largest vase, the one shaped like a swan with wings spread wide. It was heavier than she expected, solid and cold in her hands. Another contraction seized her, and she had to set it down, breathing through the pain, feeling her baby press down, 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 with an urgency that said time was running out. When she could move again, she lifted the vase above her head and hurled it at the window with every ounce of strength and rage and terror she possessed. The glass exploded outward in a shower of glittering shards. Cold November air rushed in, and with it, the sounds of the city, car horns and sirens and voices, beautiful normal human voices. Tessa leaned out the jagged opening, careful of the remaining shards, and screamed into the night. "Help! Someone help me! I'm in labor! I'm locked in, please!" Her voice disappeared into the urban noise below. People passed without looking up. Why would they? In New York, you didn't look up at screaming. You kept walking. Tessa grabbed another vase and threw it out the window. It shattered on the sidewalk below with a crash loud enough to make people scatter. Then another. Then a crystal picture frame. The wedding photo of her and Leon, smiling like they meant it, sailed out into the darkness. "Help!" She screamed again, and this time someone looked up. A man across the narrow alley between buildings, standing on his balcony with a coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. Their eyes met across the gap. "I'm in labor," Tessa shouted. "I'm locked in. Please, please help me." The man set down his coffee and disappeared into his apartment. For a terrible moment, Tessa thought he was going to ignore her, going to close his curtains and pretend he'd seen nothing. That's what people did in Leon's world. They saw nothing. They knew nothing. But then she heard it. Heavy footsteps in the hallway outside, a fist pounding on her bedroom door. "Hold on!" A man's voice called through the wood. "I'm calling 911. Hold on!" Tessa sank to the floor beneath the broken window, glass crunching under her knees, and pressed both hands against her belly as another contraction tore through her. The baby kicked once, hard, like it was fighting too. "We're going to make it," she whispered. "We're going to get out of this cage." The door splintered on the third kick. Not theatrically, not like an action movie, just a practical cracking of wood around the electronic lock mechanism until it gave way. The man who stepped through wasn't what Tessa expected. No tactical vest, no heroic jaw, just a lean figure in wire-rimmed glasses and a faded Columbia University sweatshirt, holding a fire extinguisher like he wasn't entirely sure what to do with it. Elias Thorne, 15C. He set the extinguisher down and surveyed the room with quick, analytical eyes that took in the broken window, the scattered glass, Tessa on the floor. "You're in active labor." "No kidding." Another contraction seized her and Tessa gripped the leg of the dresser, her knuckles white. When it passed, she looked up at him, this stranger who'd just committed breaking and entering to save her. "He locked me in. My husband. He cut off my phone and locked me in." Something flickered across Elias's face. Recognition, or maybe understanding. He didn't look surprised. "Can you walk?" "I don't know. We're going to find out." Ambulance is 12 minutes away minimum, and that's if they're not dealing with the 6-car pileup on the FDR. "You're having contractions every 4 minutes." He crossed to her, extended a hand. Not warm, not reassuring, just practical. "My car is faster." Tessa took his hand and let him pull her up. He was stronger than he looked, steady as she swayed against him. "I need my hospital bag. It's in the closet. I packed it 3 weeks ago. The book said to be prepared. I have receiving blankets and diapers, and you need to get to a hospital. Everything else is just things." Elias guided her toward the splintered door, his arm around her waist, taking her weight like he'd calculated the exact distribution needed. "We can get diapers at any bodega. We can't get you unpregnant in my living room." They moved through the penthouse hallway, Past the abstract art Leon had bought because his decorator said it projected power, past the security cameras that had watched Tessa pace and cry and slowly disappear into irrelevance. The elevator was locked too, requiring a key card Tessa didn't have. Stairs, Elias said simply, and pushed open the fire exit door. 15 floors. Tessa made it down 3 before another contraction hit, and she had to stop, gripping the metal railing, feeling her body bear down with an intensity that terrified her. This baby was coming. Not in hours. Soon. Breathe through it. Count to 10. Your body knows what it's doing, even if your brain doesn't. Elias didn't touch her during the contraction, didn't offer empty comfort, just stood one step below and waited with the patience of someone used to waiting. When Tessa could move again, they continued. Down and down and down. Past floors where other people lived normal lives, where husbands didn't abandon wives, where $50 wasn't an insult disguised as support. Her legs shook. Her back screamed. But she kept moving because stopping meant having this baby in a stairwell, and she refused to give Leon that final humiliation. Elias's car was a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and NYU parking permits layered on the windshield like sedimentary rock. It was the most beautiful thing Tessa had ever seen. Street Vincent's or Mount Sinai? Elias asked, pulling into traffic without signaling, driving like someone who understood that rules were negotiable in emergencies. My doctor is at Lenox Hill. Dr. Brennan. She's expecting me. I have a birthing plan. Lenox Hill requires insurance verification before they'll even wheel you into triage. I'm guessing your husband controls your insurance cards. Elias glanced at her, and in his eyes Tessa saw something that made her throat tighten. Not pity. Recognition. Like he'd seen this script before. Street Vincent's ER takes everyone. No questions, no cards. They'll bill you later, and by later I mean you can deal with it when you're not actively having a human being. He was right. Of course he was right. Everything in Tessa's life required Leon's permission, Leon's money, Leon's approval. Even giving birth. Street Vincent's, she whispered. The hospital was chaos and fluorescent lights and a nurse who took one look at Tessa and grabbed a wheelchair without asking for identification. They wheeled her past people bleeding and coughing and crying, past security guards and vending machines and signs warning about patient privacy, straight into a delivery room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. I need to call my husband, Tessa said automatically, the script Leon had written into her. The nurse checking her vitals didn't look up. Honey, you're at 8 centimeters. You need to push, not make phone calls. Elias stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights, ready to leave now that his good deed was done. But Tessa heard herself say, Stay. Please. I can't do this alone. He hesitated, and Tessa saw him calculate the cost of involvement, the risk of getting tangled in whatever nightmare she was living. Then he stepped inside and closed the door. You're not alone, he said, and pulled up a plastic chair. 3 hours later, Tessa held her son for the first time. Noah. She'd chosen the name months ago, back when she still thought Leon might care. Might be there. Might be anything other than what he was. The baby was small and red and perfect, and when he opened his eyes and looked at her, Tessa felt something crack open in her chest. This child would not grow up watching his father treat women like property, would not learn that money meant power and power meant cruelty, would not become Leon. I can't go back, Tessa said to Elias, who was still there, who'd stayed through every scream and every push, who'd held her hand when the pain got too bad and she'd needed something, anything to anchor her. I can't take him back to that place. Elias adjusted his glasses, thinking, then don't. Leon will find me. He has connections everywhere. He'll take Noah and I'll never. Leon has connections built on fear and money. You know what beats that? Elias leaned forward, his voice quiet but sharp as a blade. Information, documentation, evidence, the kind of thing that makes powerful men very, very nervous. Tessa looked down at Noah, at his tiny fist wrapped around her finger, and made a decision that would change everything. Teach me, she said. The penthouse looked exactly the same. That was the worst part. Tessa had half expected it to be transformed somehow, marked by what had happened, but Leon's world didn't change just because hers had shattered. The gray walls still trapped the November light in cold uniformity. The abstract art still hung at precise angles. The marble floors still gleamed like they were polished daily, which they were. By staff, Leon paid under the table. Noah was 5 days old, wrapped in a receiving blanket the hospital had let her keep after the social worker verified she had adequate supplies at home. Tessa had lied through her teeth. Yes, she had a crib. Yes, she had diapers and formula. Yes, someone would be home to help her. The social worker had looked skeptical, but overworked, and Tessa had walked out before anyone could ask harder questions. Elias had driven them back in silence, helping her up the elevator with the diaper bag the hospital had given her, filled with sample-sized everything. He'd offered to stay, but Tessa had said no. Some humiliations required privacy. She laid Noah in the center of their king bed, surrounded by pillows to keep him from rolling, and went to the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed with electricity. At least Leon hadn't cut that. Inside, she found half a gallon of milk gone sour, wilted lettuce, and a takeout container of pasta 3 weeks past safe. The pantry held rice, like Leon had promised, and canned beans, and a box of pasta that looked like it had been there since they moved in. Tessa's breasts ached. The lactation consultant at the hospital had said nursing would hurt at first, but this was beyond hurt. This was grinding, relentless pain every time Noah latched, and he was hungry every 2 hours, screaming with the rage of someone who discovered the world was cold and insufficient. The consultant had mentioned formula as a backup. The hospital had sent her home with 2 bottles. They were already empty. Tessa grabbed her wallet from the bedroom dresser, the Prada clutch Leon had given her for her last birthday, along with a lecture about being grateful. Inside, her credit cards gleamed like promises. Amex Black, Visa Signature, MasterCard with a limit she'd never asked about because wives didn't need to know those things. She also had the $50, still folded where she'd left it 5 days ago. The bodega 3 blocks away smelled like coffee and cleaning solution. Tessa put a canister of Similac on the counter, followed by a box of newborn diapers, then added a loaf of bread because she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten something that wasn't hospital food. $47.50, the clerk said. Tessa handed over her Amex. The card reader beeped once, then displayed a message in red. Declined. Try this one. She handed over the Visa. Same beep, same red letters. The MasterCard produced the same result. Behind her, the line was growing, people shifting weight from foot to foot, checking phones, radiating impatience. Cash only? The clerk's expression had shifted from helpful to suspicious, like Tessa was trying to scam him with fake cards despite her designer purse and exhausted desperation. She pulled out the $50 and watched it disappear across the counter. The clerk handed back 2 crumpled singles and some change. Tessa stuffed the formula and diapers into her purse and left the bread on the counter because Noah's survival mattered more than hers. The walk back felt like miles. Her body still ached from delivery, and every step sent pain radiating through her core. Noah woke up screaming halfway home, and Tessa had to stop on a bench in the building's courtyard to feed him, shivering in the November cold, while her son nursed and people walked past without looking. When she finally made it back to 15C, she found Elias standing in her doorway. He wasn't breaking in this time, just standing there with a canvas grocery bag and an expression that suggested he'd been waiting. "Your credit cards are frozen," he said. "Not a question." Tessa pushed past him into the apartment, too tired to pretend. "How did you know?" "Because men like your husband follow patterns. Financial control is step 1. He wants you desperate enough to welcome him back." Elias followed her inside, setting the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. "I brought supplies. Formula, diapers, bread, eggs, coffee. Real coffee, not the instant garbage. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to." Elias unpacked the groceries with efficient movements, storing things in the correct places like he'd lived there. "I'm offering you a trade. I'm offering you a trade." Tessa laid Noah in his car seat, the only baby equipment she had, and turned to face her neighbor. What kind of trade? Aid. You said you wanted to learn. I meant it. Elias pulled out a chair at the kitchen table, the one where Tessa used to eat breakfast alone while Leon read the Wall Street Journal, and ignored her. Your husband thinks you're helpless. He thinks money is the only power that matters. He's wrong on both counts. You don't know Leon. He has lawyers, accountants, people who make problems disappear. I'm just, Tessa's voice cracked. I'm nobody. I have $2 left and a baby, and no way to do propus. You have access to his laptop, you have his passwords, or at least you know his patterns well enough to guess them. You have intimate knowledge of his schedule, his contacts, his vulnerabilities. Elias leaned forward, and his voice was cold steel wrapped in logic. Knowledge is the only currency that doesn't devalue. Money can be frozen, taken, spent. Information? Information is forever. What would you do if every dollar you had was suddenly worthless? Would you fight back or give up? Tessa sank into the chair across from him. Noah made soft sucking sounds in his sleep, dreaming of milk and warmth. Outside, the city hummed with the sounds of people living normal lives, where husbands didn't weaponize bank accounts. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. Elias pulled a battered laptop from his messenger bag and opened it on the table between them. The screen glowed blue in the gray afternoon light. I'm proposing we take apart your husband's empire, one ledger at a time, he said. And when he comes home expecting a grateful wife, he finds a woman who knows exactly what he's worth, and more importantly, exactly what he's done. Leon's laptop sat in the hall closet behind winter coats Tessa never wore, casually hidden like it didn't contain the architecture of a criminal empire. He'd left it because he never imagined she'd think to look for it, much less understand what she found. That was Leon's fatal flaw, Elias explained. He mistook ignorance for stupidity and compliance for inability. Password first, Elias said, watching Tessa settle at the kitchen table with Noah, asleep against her chest in a makeshift sling Elias had fashioned from a bedsheet. What would he use? Not his birthday. Too obvious. Not yours. He doesn't think about you that way. Tessa's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Try Faulkner 1969, the year his father founded the first legitimate front business. The laptop unlocked. Elias smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the smile of a man watching a theory prove correct. Narcissists always tell you who they are. They just assume you're not paying attention. The desktop was organized with obsessive precision. Folders labeled shipping, real estate, legal, personal. Elias clicked on personal first and Tessa's stomach dropped. Photos of Jolene, dozens of them. Jolene on a yacht. Jolene in lingerie. Jolene laughing at some restaurant Tessa recognized from their anniversary last year. Don't look at those, Elias said, closing the folder with clinical efficiency. That's what he wants you to see. That's the emotional weapon. We're after the financial ones. He opened a folder labeled Holdings, and Tessa found herself staring at a spreadsheet that looked like alphabet soup. Columns of letters and numbers. Abbreviations she didn't recognize. Amounts that shifted between red and black with no patterns she could identify. This is a shell company structure, Elias said, pulling the laptop closer and highlighting a cell. See this? Falk Corp Holdings, LLC. Registered in Delaware because Delaware doesn't require disclosure of ownership. It owns 3 other companies: Atlantic Marine Services, Brighton Property Group, and NoHo Development Associates. I don't understand. Tessa shifted Noah slightly, feeling him root against her even in sleep. Why doesn't he just put everything in one company? Because one company can be investigated. One company has a clear paper trail, but 20 companies that own each other in circular patterns? Elias pulled up another spreadsheet, this one showing a web of connections that looked like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. That's a maze. By the time prosecutors figure out who owns what, the money has moved 3 more times. Tessa leaned in, studying the numbers. Atlantic Marine Services showed quarterly revenues of $2.3 million, but expenses of $2.7 million. This company is losing money. Is it? Elias highlighted another cell. Look at where the expenses go. Port Authority consulting fees, $400,000. Paid to a company called Harbor Solutions, which if you follow this thread, he clicked through 3 more spreadsheets, is owned by Falk Corp Holdings, which is owned by Leon. The pattern snapped into focus like an optical illusion reversing itself. He's paying himself. He's laundering money. Atlantic Marine brings in cash from whatever illegal activity, probably drug transportation based on the maritime focus. That cash gets cleaned by paying inflated consulting fees to his own companies. By the time it comes out the other end, it looks legitimate. Elias opened a document labeled Tax Returns 2024, and he writes it off as business expenses, so he barely pays taxes on the illegal income. Tessa's hands trembled slightly as she took control of the laptop, clicking through folders, following the threads Elias had shown her. Each company connected to 3 others. Each transaction had a mirror transaction somewhere else. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like watching a predator move. "How do you know all this?" she asked. "I used to do forensic accounting for the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District. I helped build RICO cases against organizations exactly like your husband's." Elias's voice went flat. "Then I testified in a trial, and 3 weeks later someone tried to run me off the Hutchinson Parkway. I survived. My wife didn't." The kitchen went very quiet. Noah stirred against Tessa's chest, making the soft grunting sounds that meant he'd be awake and hungry soon. "Leon?" Tessa whispered. "Never proven. That's the thing about men like Leon. They have layers of protection. They don't pull triggers themselves. They just make suggestions to people who owe them favors." Elias took off his glasses and cleaned them on his shirt, and without them, he looked older, haunted. "I stopped testifying. Moved to this building under a different name. Tried to disappear. But you're helping me. Because knowledge doesn't disappear. It compounds." He put his glasses back on. "Your turn. Find me the shell company that owns this building." Tessa searched through the spreadsheets, cross-referencing property addresses with company names. It took her 20 minutes and 3 false starts, but she found it. Greystone Property Holdings owns this building plus 4 others in Manhattan. Keep going. Who owns Greystone? Another search, deeper into the maze. Atlantic Coast Ventures. And who owns that? Peninsula Holdings, which is owned by. Tessa followed the thread to its end. Falk Corp Holdings, which means the realization hit like ice water. Leon owns this building. He's been my landlord the whole time. He owns my cage. He owns 15% of the residential real estate in this neighborhood. He collects rent from 300 families who have no idea they're funding organized crime. Elias pulled up another document, this one showing bank transfers. But here's the beautiful part. He's not paying property taxes on half these buildings. Look at this address. 447 West 18th Street. Officially owned by a defunct charity called the Harbor Relief Fund. Gets a tax exemption for low-income housing. But it's not low-income housing. It's luxury condos starting at $3 million. The charity exists on paper only. Leon created it, staffed it with people on his payroll, filed the paperwork, and pocketed the tax savings. That's tax fraud. Federal tax fraud. Tessa stared at the numbers, at the web of lies Leon had spun while she'd been planning nurseries and folding his socks. How much has he stolen? Stolen from who? The government? Conservatively, $4 million in unpaid taxes over the last 3 years. From the people whose drug money he launders? Impossible to say. From you? Elias met her eyes. Everything. He's stolen your agency, your choices, your ability to leave. That's the crime that matters. Noah woke up crying, his face scrunching into outrage. Tessa adjusted him to nurse, wincing through the initial pain. While her son fed, she kept reading, kept clicking, kept following the money with a focus she'd never applied to anything in her life. She wasn't Leon's wife anymore. She was an auditor, and the books were about to balance. "Teach me how to copy all of this without him knowing," Tessa said. "Teach me how to build a case." Elias smiled. "Now you're thinking like someone who's going to win." The password to Leon's cloud storage turned out to be even easier than the laptop. Faulkner 1969 with an exclamation point. Because somewhere in Leon's criminal mind, he'd absorbed the advice that passwords needed special characters but hadn't bothered to get creative. Men who believed themselves untouchable rarely bothered with proper security. Why would they? Who would dare look? Tessa dared. At 2 in the morning, with Noah finally asleep in his car seat beside her, she sat at the kitchen table with the glow of the laptop screen turning her face ghost white and clicked through Leon's digital kingdom like she was walking through rooms in a house she'd never been allowed to enter. The cloud contained everything. Bank statements going back 7 years, contracts signed with people whose names Tessa recognized from news coverage of indictments, emails discussing shipments and territories and payments with the casual tone of men ordering lunch. Leon hadn't even bothered to use code. He'd written cocaine shipment delayed at Newark like he was discussing furniture delivery. He thinks he's invincible, Tessa whispered to the empty kitchen. Noah made a sound in his sleep, and she reached over to rock the car seat gently. Your father thinks he's a god. But gods didn't make spreadsheets with 3 different sets of books. Gods didn't need to track which version of reality they'd told to which agency. Tessa opened a folder labeled NEIJH Boarhood Initiative and found what Elias had taught her to look for. The legitimate front. Leon owned or had stakes in 43 businesses within a 6-block radius of the penthouse, a dry cleaner, 3 restaurants, a gym, 2 bodegas, a nail salon, a car wash. She recognized most of them, had walked past them 1,000 times, had even used some of them back when her credit cards worked. The dry cleaner's books showed it processed 700 garments per week at an average of $12 each. That was $8,400 weekly, roughly $436,000 annually. Reasonable for a small business in Manhattan. But the bank deposits told a different story. The dry cleaner was depositing $52,000 per month, over $600,000 annually. Someone was dry cleaning a lot of invisible clothes. Tessa cross-referenced the deposit dates with another spreadsheet labeled Collections. Every Friday, the dry cleaner deposited exactly $12,000. The same day, Collections showed a transfer of $12,000 from something called Street Operations Northeast. The money came in dirty, got washed through the dry cleaner's legitimate sales, and came out clean enough to deposit in banks that ask questions. She found the same pattern at the car wash. The nail salon. One of the bodegas that stayed open 24 hours despite never having more than 2 customers whenever Tessa walked past. They were all washing machines, taking Leon's illegal cash and mixing it with just enough legitimate business to make it look real. You're not even good at this, Tessa muttered, copying files to a USB drive Elias had given her, encrypted with security that made Leon's password look like a child's diary lock. You're just arrogant enough to think no one would look. The restaurant files were worse. Bruno's Italian Kitchen on West 19th showed payroll for 32 employees, but Tessa had eaten there exactly once with Leon, and there'd been maybe 8 people working. She opened the detailed payroll records and found names she recognized. Tessa Faulkner, listed as a consultant, paid $4,000 monthly for the past 3 years. She'd never consulted for anyone, had never received those payments, had never even known she was on a payroll. Leon was using her identity to create fake employees, paying ghost workers with drug money, and creating paper trails that would implicate her if anyone came looking. If the feds ever raided Bruno's, they'd find Tessa's social security number attached to income she'd never received, tax forms she'd never signed, W-2 seconds that made her look complicit. Her hands shook as she copied the payroll files. This wasn't just financial abuse anymore. This was a frame job. This quote, this canala Alician. Leon had built her a cage with bars made of false documents, and if he ever needed a fall guy, Tessa would be there in black and white, looking guilty of crimes she hadn't known existed. Would you have thought to look for your own name in your abuser's files? Comment below what you would have done. Noah woke up crying, sharp, hungry cries that meant he wanted food now, not in 5 minutes. Tessa saved her work, closed the laptop, and lifted her son to her breast. He latched on with desperate intensity, and Tessa felt her body respond with the letdown reflex that still surprised her. This biological imperative that didn't care about federal crimes or fraudulent payrolls. "I've got the smoking gun," she told Noah, who didn't care, who just wanted milk and warmth and the illusion that the world was safe. Every shell company, every fake employee, every dollar he laundered through neighborhood businesses. It's all here. /70 well. The question was what to do with it. Elias had taught her how to read the evidence, but he hadn't taught her how to weaponize it. Not yet. That lesson was coming, Tessa knew. But first she needed to understand the full scope of what she held. She opened the laptop again one-handed, Noah still nursing, and searched the cloud for her own name. What she found made her blood turn to slurry in her veins. A folder labeled insurance policy. Inside, documents showing Tessa as co-signer on 12 different business loans, totaling $3.7 million. Loan applications with her forged signature. Bank statements showing transfers from accounts in her name to offshore holdings she'd never heard of. A pre-signed confession, her signature perfectly copied, admitting to embezzlement and money laundering, dated but not filed. Leon had built her an entire criminal identity while she'd been shopping for nursery furniture and learning to make his mother's lasagna recipe. If he ever needed to disappear, or if the feds ever got too close, he could produce these documents and make Tessa the architect of everything. The pregnant wife nobody would suspect until it was too late. She burned the files to the USB drive with shaking hands. Copied everything. The real books and the fake books and the secret books Leon kept from everyone. By the time Noah finished nursing and fell back asleep, Tessa had documented enough federal crimes to put Leon away for 3 lifetimes. If you're rooting for Tessa to take Leon down, hit that like button right now. She's going to need all the support she can get. The sun was starting to rise, turning the gray walls of the penthouse softer, almost lavender in the early light. Tessa ejected the USB drive and held it up to the window, this tiny piece of plastic that contained Leon's entire empire. "Knowledge is the only currency that doesn't devalue," Elias had said. Tessa smiled for the first time in weeks. She'd just gotten very, very rich. Leon's call came at 6:47 inches the morning, 3 weeks into what was supposed to be a month-long trip. Tessa was changing Noah's diaper on the bed, her phone face down on the nightstand where she'd learned to leave it so she wouldn't jump every time it lit up with blocked numbers or unknown callers. But this time, the vibration was insistent. 3 long buzzes that meant Leon had programmed himself as an emergency contact. Because of course he had. She stared at the screen. Leon. Mobile. Her finger hovered over the decline button, imagining the satisfaction of sending him to voicemail, of making him wait the way he'd made her wait through contractions and birth, and 3 weeks of learning to be a mother alone. But Elias had been clear. Don't let him know you've changed. Don't let him see you coming. Tessa answered on the 4th ring, made her voice small and uncertain. The voice of the woman Leon expected. Hello. The accounts are frozen. No greeting, no asking about the baby he'd never met, just accusation wrapped in anger. In the background, Tessa heard airport sounds, announcements in Italian. The rolling of luggage wheels. Every single business account is locked pending review. Do you know what that means, Tessa? Do you have any idea what you've done? Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady, confused, helpless. I don't understand. I haven't done anything. I've been here with the baby. You had the baby? A pause, like he was recalculating, remembering she'd been pregnant when he left. When? 3 weeks ago. The night you left, actually. I tried to call, but my phone wasn't working. She let a tremor creep into her voice, the sound of a woman on the edge of tears. It was scary, Leon. I had to go to a public hospital. I didn't have insurance cards or money or... Jesus Christ, Tessa, I don't have time for this. The banks are saying there's suspicious activity on multiple accounts. They're talking about audits, about federal review. Someone has been accessing my files. Tessa secured Noah's diaper and picked him up, holding him against her shoulder where his warmth steadied her. How would I access your files? I don't even know your passwords. You never told me anything about the business. Exactly. So explain to me how Chase, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America all flagged my accounts on the same day. Leon's voice was rising, that dangerous edge that used to make Tessa flinch. Now it just made her focus. Someone reported suspicious transactions, someone who had access to detailed records. Maybe it was Jolene. Tessa let the name sit there, poisonous. She has access to everything, doesn't she? You took her to handle the Italian negotiations. She must have all your account numbers, your business details. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Tessa knew she'd landed a hit. Leon hadn't considered that his mistress might be the weak link, might be the one who could destroy him. Men like Leon never considered that the women they underestimated might be dangerous. Jolene wouldn't, but he sounded less certain now. I'm just saying I've been here alone with a newborn. I couldn't even buy diapers with my credit cards. You froze everything, remember? How would I access bank accounts when I can't even access my own phone plan? Tessa walked to the window, looking out at the gray November morning. Somewhere in that city, federal investigators were already looking at the files she'd anonymously submitted through Elias's encrypted channels. Maybe the banks just noticed something. Maybe you should come home and deal with it. I'm already at the airport. I'm on the next flight to JFK. Lands at 3 p.m. your time. Leon's voice shifted back to command mode, the tone he used when he expected obedience. I need you to have the house ready, clean, organized, not looking like some disaster zone, and I need you to have copied all the files from my laptop to a secure drive, everything in the holdings folder, and anything labeled legal. Can you do that, Tessa? Or is that too complicated? I can do that. She made her voice eager to please, desperate for approval. Should I order food? Your favorite from Del Posto? I still have the $50 you left. I've been very careful with it. The mention of the $50 hung between them, and Tessa heard him shift uncomfortably. Even Leon possessed enough self-awareness to know that leaving his pregnant wife with pocket change made him look bad, though he'd probably framed it differently in his own mind. Tough love. Teaching her to be resourceful. Use the household account, he said. I'll have the cards reactivated by the time I land. Order whatever. Just make sure the house looks presentable. I'm bringing some associates back for a meeting. Important people. I need you to play hostess. Of course, I'll make everything perfect. Tessa kept her voice light, dutiful, empty of the rage that was building in her chest like a storm. What about Noah? Should I keep him in the bedroom during your meeting? I know babies can be disruptive. Another pause. Noah? Your son. I named him Noah. After my grandfather, she didn't add. The one man in my family who told me I was worth more than being someone's property. Right. Yes. Keep him quiet. Leon's attention was already elsewhere. She could hear him talking to someone in Italian, something about boarding groups. I have to go. 3 p.m. Tessa. Have everything ready. He hung up without saying goodbye, without asking if his son was healthy, without acknowledging that he'd abandoned his wife in labor and was only coming back because his money was in danger. Tessa set the phone down and looked at Noah, who was watching her with dark eyes that hadn't quite decided what color they'd be yet. Blue like hers, or brown like Leon's. She hoped blue. She hoped this child would take nothing from his father except a last name they'd eventually change. Your father is coming home, she told Noah softly, and he has no idea what's waiting for him. She had 7 hours to prepare, 7 hours to copy the files Leon wanted, the ones that would show him everything was fine, everything was normal. 7 hours to hide the USB drive containing his real empire. The evidence that would destroy him. 7 hours to become the wife Leon expected while planning his complete annihilation. Tessa called Elias. He answered on the first ring. He's coming back, she said. Today, 3 p.m. Are you ready? Tessa looked around the penthouse, at the gray walls that had been her prison, at the bedroom where Leon had tossed her $50 like she was a beggar. She thought about the files she'd copied, the federal investigators already building cases, the evidence that would turn Leon's empire into rubble. I'm ready, she said. Let's finish this. The FBI field office in Lower Manhattan looked nothing like the ones on television. No dramatic lighting, no glass walls with important-looking people striding past in suits. Just beige walls, fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects, and a waiting area with chairs that had seen better decades. Tessa sat with Noah in a carrier strapped to her chest, watching a water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere she'd never been. Elias sat beside her, not touching, just present. He'd made the initial contact through channels Tessa didn't ask about, former colleagues who still trusted him even after he'd disappeared into civilian life. He'd told them he had a witness with evidence of a RICO case worth $30 million in seized assets. That got their attention. Money always did. Mrs. Faulkner? A woman emerged from a secure door, late 40s, dark hair pulled back severe enough to hurt, wearing a pantsuit that said she'd stopped caring about fashion around the same time she'd stopped expecting the justice system to be just. "I'm Special Agent Patricia Reeves. Thank you for coming in." Tessa stood, adjusting Noah's carrier. "I wasn't sure you'd agree to meet." Mine. A witness volunteering evidence against the Faulkner organization? Reeves smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We'd be fools not to listen. Please follow me." The conference room was exactly as depressing as the waiting area. Reeves sat across from Tessa with another agent, younger, male, taking notes on a laptop with the enthusiasm of someone who'd rather be literally anywhere else. Elias sat beside Tessa, a silent presence she drew strength from. "Before we begin," Tessa said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected, clear and direct. "I need to establish terms." Reeves's eyebrows rose slightly. "Terms? I'm not a criminal turning state's evidence out of guilt. I'm a victim of financial abuse and identity theft providing evidence against my abuser. I need guarantees before I hand over anything." Tessa pulled a folded piece of paper from Noah's diaper bag, notes she and Elias had prepared at 2 in the morning. "Full immunity from prosecution for any crimes committed using my identity or social security number without my knowledge or consent. Documentation from this office confirming I had no involvement in Leon Faulkner's criminal enterprises, and a written statement I can use in family court." "Family court?" The younger agent looked up from his laptop. "I want sole custody of my son. Leon Faulkner is not fit to be a parent. I need federal documentation of his criminal activity to support my custody petition." Tessa kept her hands steady on the table, but under it her knee was bouncing, nervous energy she couldn't quite suppress. "I also need witness protection assets without mandatory relocation." Reeves leaned back, studying Tessa like she was a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. "Witness protection without relocation isn't standard. The program exists to keep witnesses safe by moving them away from potential threats. I'm not running. If I run, I lose. Leon will use my disappearance to paint me as an unfit mother who abandoned her child. He'll get custody by default." Tessa met Reeves's gaze and didn't blink. "I need resources, security monitoring, emergency contacts, a panic button system, legal support for the custody case, but I'm staying in New York and I'm keeping my name." "That's a significant risk to yourself." "Everything is a significant risk. Staying was a risk. Leaving was a risk. Having his baby was a risk." Noah stirred against her chest and Tessa placed a hand on his back, feeling his tiny heartbeat through the fabric. "At least this way, I'm the one controlling which risks I take." The room went quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. The younger agent glanced at Reeves, waiting for direction. Reeves tapped her pen against her notepad, thinking. "What exactly do you have?" Reeves asked finally. Tessa pulled the USB drive from her pocket and set it on the table between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. 7 years of financial records, 3 sets of books for 43 businesses, shell company structures showing money laundering through legitimate fronts, tax fraud documentation, forged loan applications using my identity, evidence of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, email correspondence discussing cocaine shipments, territory disputes, and payments to corrupt officials, and a pre-signed confession Leon created to frame me if he ever needed a fall guy. Reeves picked up the USB drive, turned it over in her hands. "You accessed your husband's secured files." "I accessed files on a laptop left in my home, using a password I guessed." Is that illegal? Tessa's voice stayed level. I'm his wife. We share a residence. Community property state. His property is my property. That's a creative legal interpretation. I learned from the best. My husband has 17 lawyers on retainer and hasn't spent a day in jail despite running a criminal empire for 2 decades. If he can be creative with the law, so can I. Reeves almost smiled. Almost. You said there's evidence of officials on his payroll? 2 NYPD officers. A housing inspector. Someone in the DA's office, though the emails use only initials, so I can't confirm who. Tessa watched Reeves's expression shift from skeptical to interested. That's why I'm here and not at the local precinct. I don't know who in the system Leon owns. How far would you go to protect your child from a dangerous man? Let us know in the comments. The younger agent was typing faster now. Invested. Reeves set the USB drive down and folded her hands on the table. If this evidence is as comprehensive as you claim, we can offer immunity and documentation for family court. But Mrs. Faulkner, you need to understand something. Taking down a man like Leon Faulkner isn't clean. It's not quick. You're looking at months of testimony, depositions, probably a trial. You'll have to face him in court. You'll have to relive every moment of abuse while his lawyers try to destroy your credibility. I know. Tessa had imagined it 100 times. The courtroom, the questions, Leon staring at her with that cold disappointment he used better than affection. But I'd rather face him in a courtroom where there are rules than face him in our home where there aren't any. And the child? Reeves glanced at Noah, sleeping peacefully against Tessa's chest, oblivious to the fact that his mother was dismantling his father's life. You're exposing him to danger. Leon's associates won't be happy about this. They'll see you as a traitor. There will be threats. There are already threats. The threat of raising my son in a criminal empire. The threat of him growing up thinking his father's behavior is normal. The threat of Noah becoming exactly like Leon. Tessa's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. I'd rather face concrete danger I can prepare for than abstract danger that slowly poisons everything. Reeves looked at Elias for the first time. And you are? And? A concerned neighbor, Elias said, former forensic accountant. I helped Mrs. Faulkner understand what she was looking at. Elias Thorne, Southern District, 2019. Reeves's face showed recognition. You testified in the Castellano case. Then you disappeared. I got smart. Elias's voice was flat. Took me a dead wife to figure out that being right doesn't keep you safe. But Mrs. Faulkner doesn't have the luxury of disappearing. So I'm making sure she's prepared. Reeves nodded slowly, then turned back to Tessa. I'll need to verify this evidence. If it checks out, we have a deal. Immunity, documentation, protection assets without relocation. But you follow our security protocols. You check in daily, you don't contact Leon without our knowledge, and when we're ready to move, you testify. No backing out. No changing your mind because you're scared or because he promises to change. He won't promise to change. He doesn't think he's done anything wrong. Tessa stood, Noah still sleeping against her. When will you know if the evidence is sufficient? Give me 48 hours. We'll analyze everything, verify the documentation, cross-reference with ongoing investigations. Reeves stood as well, extending her hand. Mrs. Faulkner, what you're doing takes courage most people don't have. I hope you understand that. Oh, Tessa shook her hand, firm and sure. I understand that courage and desperation look a lot alike from the outside, but from the inside, I can tell the difference. She walked out of the FBI field office with Noah sleeping and Elias silent beside her. And for the first time in her marriage, Tessa Faulkner felt like she was the one holding all the cards. Leon didn't knock. He never knocked on doors he believed he owned, and he owned everything, including Tessa. The penthouse door slammed open at 3:47 p.m., 47 minutes late, and his voice carried through the hallway before his body appeared. Where is it? Where's the laptop? Tessa sat on the edge of the bed, the exact spot where this had all started 3 weeks ago. But everything was different now. She wasn't slumped. She wasn't staring at money in her hands, feeling worthless. She sat straight, shoulders back. Noah sleeping in the bassinet Elias had loaned her, positioned far enough from the door that the coming violence wouldn't wake him. Leon appeared in the bedroom doorway and Tessa barely recognized him. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his hair uncombed in a way that would have been unthinkable a month ago. He looked like what he was, a man whose carefully constructed empire was collapsing and who couldn't understand why the world had stopped obeying his commands. There you are. He crossed the room in 3 strides, looming over her in a physical intimidation tactic that used to work. I told you to have everything ready. Where are the files I need? On your desk. Copied to a drive like you asked. Tessa's voice was calm, almost pleasant. Everything in the holdings folder, everything labeled legal. Exactly what you requested. Leon stared at her, and she watched him try to process this version of his wife. The Tessa he'd left had been meek, compliant, trained to flinch when he raised his voice. This Tessa sat perfectly still, watching him with the detached interest of someone observing an experiment. What's wrong with you? He demanded. Nothing. I'm fine. How was Italy? Italy was. Leon stopped, recalibrating. He moved to his desk, grabbed the USB drive Tessa had left there, plugged it into his laptop. She watched him click through the folders, checking that everything was there, all the surface-level files he thought mattered. His shoulders relaxed fractionally. The accounts are still frozen, every single one. Someone filed a suspicious activity report. That's terrible, Tessa said, and meant it. It was terrible for Leon. For her, it was justice beginning to look like possibility. Footsteps in the hallway. Jolene appeared in the doorway, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than the hospital bill for Noah's birth, her expression shifting from bored to hostile the moment she saw Tessa. This is where you've been hiding? Jolene's voice dripped with contempt. She looked around the bedroom like it was a crime scene. God, it's so gray in here. So depressing. Leon, how did you stand living like this? Jolene. Not now. Leon was still clicking through files, distracted. I'm just saying, when we move to the Lake Como property, we're hiring an actual decorator. Someone with taste. Jolene leaned against the doorframe, her gaze landing on Noah's bassinet. Is that the baby? It's smaller than I expected. Are you sure it's healthy? Tessa felt rage ignite in her chest but kept her face neutral. He's perfect. If you say so. Jolene examined her nails, bored already. Leon, how long is this going to take? I'm starving and you promised we'd go to 11 Madison Park. I said not now. Leon slammed the laptop shut, frustration radiating off him in waves. He turned back to Tessa. The feds are asking questions. About shell companies, about businesses in the neighborhood, about payroll irregularities. Someone gave them detailed information, someone who had access. Well, it wasn't me. Tessa stood slowly, walked to the nightstand, opened the drawer. Inside, smooth flat where she'd kept it, was the $50 bill Leon had given her. She'd saved it specifically for this moment. I've been busy learning how to be a mother with the generous resources you provided. She held out the cash. Leon stared at it, uncomprehending. Take it back, Tessa said. You're going to need it for the commissary. What the hell are you talking about? Federal prison commissary. I hear it's expensive. You'll want money for phone calls, decent soap, maybe some snacks. $50 won't last long, but it's a start. Leon's face went dark, the muscle near his temple jumping. You think you're funny? You think this is a game? I think this is accountability. Tessa set the $50 on the bed between them. I think you locked me in this apartment while I was in labor. I think you froze my credit cards and my phone. I think you left me with pocket change and expected me to be grateful. And I think you severely underestimated who I am. You're nothing. Leon's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet register. You're a vessel I used to produce in air. You have no education, no skills, no money of your own. Without me, you're homeless with a baby. So whatever you think you're doing, stop now. She already stopped you. Elias's voice came from the hallway. He stepped into view, calm and steady. It's done, Leon. The FBI has everything. Leon's head snapped toward Elias. Who the hell are you? The neighbor who delivered your son while you were in Europe buying Cartier bracelets for your mistress. Elias moved to stand beside Tessa, not touching, just present. The forensic accountant who taught your wife how to read your books. The witness who's going to testify that you used shell companies to launder drug money through neighborhood businesses. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Leon lunged at Elias with the speed of a man who'd built his empire on violence. But Elias had already stepped back, and before Leon could reach him, the apartment door burst open with the specific sound of federal agents who didn't need permission. FBI, hands where we can see them. 4 agents flooded the bedroom, weapons drawn, voices overlapping commands. Leon froze, hands halfway to Elias's throat, caught mid-attack. Jolene screamed, high-pitched and useless, backing against the wall. Special Agent Reeves entered last, calm as someone arriving at a dinner party. Leon Faulkner, you're under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, tax fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. She nodded to an agent who moved forward with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Leon's eyes found Tessa across the chaos. You did this. I survived this, Tessa corrected. There's a difference. They cuffed him with efficient brutality, reading rights he probably knew better than the agents did. Jolene was crying now, mascara running, suddenly remembering she was just an accountant who'd made catastrophically bad choices about workplace romance. Leon, tell them this is a mistake. Jolene's voice cracked. Tell them I didn't know anything. But Leon wasn't looking at Jolene. He was staring at Tessa with an expression she'd never seen before. Genuine surprise. He'd underestimated her so completely that even now, being led away in handcuffs, he couldn't quite process that she'd been the one to destroy him. You'll never survive without me, he said as they pushed him toward the door. Tessa picked up Noah from his bassinet, held him close. Watch me. They took Leon away. They took Jolene for questioning. They left Tessa standing in the gray bedroom with her son and her neighbor, and the smoking ruins of the empire she'd burned to the ground with nothing but patience and a USB drive. Agent Reeves lingered in the doorway. Are you okay, Mrs. Faulkner? Tessa looked around the penthouse one last time. The gray walls, the expensive furniture, the cage she'd lived in thinking it was protection. I'm free, she said. That's better than okay. The Brooklyn brownstones smelled of roasted coffee beans and old paper, a stark departure from the antiseptic, cold lavender scent of the penthouse that had once been her prison. Tessa sat at her mahogany desk, the wood warm beneath her fingertips, and turned her laptop screen toward the young woman sitting across from her. The woman, Maria, was trembling, her hands clutching a designer purse that Tessa knew was likely the only asset she was allowed to hold. He told you the business is failing, Tessa said, her voice soft but laced with the steel of a forensic auditor. She highlighted a column on the spreadsheet. But failing businesses don't wire $10,000 a month to a holdings company in the Cayman Islands. He isn't losing money, Maria. He's hiding it. Maria stared at the numbers, the tears finally spilling over. It was the same look Tessa had worn 5 years ago, the terrifying, vertigo-inducing realization that the person sleeping next to you was an architect of your own destruction. But unlike Tessa, Maria wouldn't have to break a window to be heard. She had Tessa. The Ledger Project, Tessa's consultancy firm, had started small, just her and a laptop at a kitchen table. Now, it was the first line of defense for women trapped in the gilded cages of New York's elite. Tessa didn't just offer sympathy, she offered subpoenas, forensic tracing, and the kind of irrefutable math that stood up in federal court. She taught them that financial literacy was a form of self-defense more potent than pepper spray. As Maria left, clutching a folder of evidence that would secure her freedom, Tessa walked to the window. Outside, the autumn leaves were turning gold, a color that no longer reminded her of Leon's cufflinks, but of change. Leon Faulkner was currently sitting in a 6x8 cell in a Pennsylvania supermax, serving life without the possibility of parole. The irony was poetic. The man who had locked her in a penthouse was now locked in a cage of his own making, stripped of his tailored suits and his terrifying influence. His empire hadn't just crumbled. It had been liquidated, the proceeds seized by the government or redistributed to the victims of his racketeering schemes. He hadn't gone down quietly, of course. He had raged and threatened until the very end. But the final nail in his coffin hadn't been Tessa's testimony alone, it had been Jolene's. The mistress he had chosen for her usefulness had proven to be exactly that, useful to the prosecution. Facing 20 years as an accomplice, Jolene had turned on Leon with the same ruthless self-preservation he had instilled in everyone around him. She had traded her black evening gowns for a wire and a reduced sentence, revealing the location of the physical servers Tessa hadn't been able to reach. Leon had been undone by the two women he had viewed as nothing more than accessories. Tessa turned away from the window and walked into the living room, where the late afternoon sun cast long, warm shadows across the rug. "Knight to e5, Elias said, his voice low and patient. "Think about your flank, Noah. If you move the knight, what happens to your queen?" Noah, now 5 years old with unruly dark hair and eyes that shone with intelligence, chewed on his lip, his hand hovering over the chessboard. He didn't have the fearful flinch Tessa had worked so hard to erase in those early months. He was confident, loved, and safe. "If I move the knight," Noah murmured, mimicking Elias's analytical tone, "the bishop takes the pawn. But then, checkmate in two." "Exactly." Elias smiled, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Never sacrifice position for a quick capture. That's a short-term gain." Tessa leaned against the doorframe, watching them. Elias wasn't Noah's biological father, but biology was the least important part of parenthood. Leon had provided DNA, Elias had provided patience, safety, and the kind of quiet, steady love that didn't ask for a return on investment. He had taught Noah to ride a bike, to read a balance sheet, and to understand that strength wasn't about controlling others, but about controlling yourself. Elias looked up, catching her eye. The connection between them was a silent, unbreakable thread. They had rebuilt their lives on the foundation of truth, no hidden accounts, no secret passwords, just the open ledger of a partnership. Noah made his move, triumphantly knocking Elias's king over with a plastic clatter. "Checkmate." "Well played," Elias laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "You're getting dangerous." "Mom taught me how to trap the king." Noah grinned, looking at Tessa. Tessa smiled, walking over to join them. She picked up the fallen king piece, turning it over in her hand. It was just plastic and weight, powerless without the board to give it meaning. She thought about the $50 Leon had thrown on the bed all those years ago. He had thought that by controlling the money, he controlled the mind. He had thought that stripping her of assets would strip her of agency. He had been wrong. She placed the king back on the board and kissed the top of her son's head. The nightmare was over, replaced by a reality she had audited and approved herself. She had learned the most expensive lesson of her life, and she taught it to every client who walked through her door. A man can steal your money, freeze your accounts, and lock your doors. But he can never steal your mind once you decide to sharpen it into a weapon. If Tessa's journey inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story to remind every woman you know that knowledge is power. And hit that follow button for more stories about turning the tables on those who underestimate us.